Hello guys, this is your friend. We are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto fell into a world where beautiful maidens desired his touch? Sakura, Tsunade, Mikoto, Kushina, Hana, Tamari and Yugao Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start a new fanfic. A 17-year-old Naruto sighed heavily as Jiraiya had left him once again to go and peep on women in the hot springs or whatever it was he did in these stupid towns they passed through. He just didn't give a damn anymore. Instead, he had taken to rifling through Jiraiya's things, taking book after book on Fuinjutsu from Jiraiya's things without the bastard learning about it. Naruto wasn't an idiot. Not by a long shot. Yes, he played the role of a fool growing up and during his time on Team 7 simply because it was the easiest way to deal with all the shit he had to put up with on a daily basis. Now, however, he had hoped to get an actual Ing teacher for a change, but Jiraiya had proven to be anything but. Grumbling irritably to himself, he applied the finishing touches to a seal he had been working on for some time. What was this seal he had come up with, you might ask? Well, considering all the abuse and neglect he had suffered, he decided that he had simply had enough of living in this wretched world. Corruption and greed were everywhere, as was perversity, lust, hate, and far more. Naruto realized that hardly anyone actually gave a damn about him, so he figured it was time to go. Time to leave for another realm. If he died in the process, well, he didn't rightly care. At least then he'd get some Ing peace. Making sure he had his bag packed and he had taken everything he wanted from Jiraiya's things, he walked off to be truly alone and proceeded to lay down the sealing tag on the ground before him. Performing a single hand seal, he activated the tag and watched as a portal appeared in front of him. Without even looking back, he stepped through the portal that led to an unknown realm in an unknown time and space. As soon as the portal closed behind him, the tag erupted in flames, burning away as if it never existed. Well shit. A voice could be heard saying as a plant-like man appeared from the ground. They're not going to like this, the black half said before he melded with the ground again and disappeared without a trace. Weeks later, Konohagakure. What the hell do you mean you lost him? What the hell were you doing, Jiraiya? You had one Ing job and you blew it. What happened to training him properly, Jiraiya? Tsunade yelled, absolutely furious with her old teammate right now. To be fair, he just doesn't have the same kind of genius that his parents did. And he fought me every step of the way. Whatever I told him to do, he either didn't want to do it or he complained the entire time. Tell him to work on the basics and he'd claim he needed better training than that. Tried to get him to tap into the Kyuubi's chakra, he whined and complained and fought me again and again, every damn time. If he was going to be so uncooperative, then why not focus on my precious research and do more important things? It's not my fault he's such a pathetic shinobi. Jiraiya said, sounding genuinely irritated. Before Jiraiya knew what was happening, Tsunade her hand wrapped around his throat and he was lifted off of the floor. As he began to choke and spots began to fill his vision, she growled out, did you ever stop to think that maybe you needed to try a different approach? Naruto-kun was hoping to have a competent teacher this time around. Obviously that was too much to ask for. You would rather peep on women in their private moments than try to help your only Ing godson. You knew the Akatsuki were after him. You knew he needed proper training and you blew him off because he wanted some proper goddamn training for a change. Tsunade carried Jiraiya over to the nearby wall and started slamming him against it repeatedly until it finally collapsed. Tossing Jiraiya to the floor, she watched as he gasped for breath and began to beg for mercy. Without missing a beat, she kicked him in the stomach and sent him flying into the opposite wall. You didn't know that Naruto was smarter than he let on, did you? No, you took one look at him and judged him based on that mask of his. Naruto confided the truth in Shizune and me one day. How he had to play the fool just so the Ing village wouldn't claim he was outshining their precious golden boy, that Ing traitorous Uchiha. With him gone, Naruto was free to drop his mask. But you didn't care. By then you had already judged him as a failure and you had no intention of training him seriously. TCH, I bet you took the same approach with his father and look where that got him. Jiraiya snarled at her and growled out, "Don't you dare badmouth Minato in front of me." Glaring at Jiraiya, she kicked him hard in the face, knocking more than a few teeth out in the process and breaking his nose. "I'll do whatever the hell I want. You're a failure as a teacher, Jiraiya. You can't even see when your student needs your guidance. You'd rather write your goddamn smut than help your godson. You promised Minato and Kushina that you would watch over him and you neglected to do so because your research was more important to you than Naruto. What? Do you blame him for Minato's death or something? Is that why you refused to help him?" When he didn't dispute her point, her eyes widened and she said, "You asshole. How could you possibly blame Naruto for his parents' deaths?" Jiraiya scowled at her and said, "If Kushina had never gotten pregnant with that blasted child, they'd both still be alive. Naruto's a cursed child and there was no way in hell I was going to get close to that thing. So what?" Clenching her fists even tighter, Tsunade barely restrained herself from killing him. "Reverse summon him. Now. I tried that already. Ma and Pa told me that wherever he is, they can't reverse summon the brat. He's gone, Tsunade. I don't know where he's gone to or what the hell he did, but he's gone. His name's still on the contract, so he's not dead. But we can't reach him. The toads can, but they're pissed." Jiraiya explained, clearly frustrated with the whole situation. "Then I suppose you have no more use to me, Jiraiya. Let your punishment fit the crime, I say. I don't care if you run this village's spy network, Jiraiya. You are replaceable. You're nothing special. Just a pathetic wannabe. Strike your name from the Toad contract. Right now. If you won't do it, I'll contact the slugs and have them talk to the toads on my behalf. Then they can punish you how they see fit. However, if I know Naruto like I think I do, he's probably getting in touch with them as we speak. So you have one of two options here. You can either strike your name from the contract willingly, or the toads will remove you from the contract themselves for being negligent in your duties as a godfather. Afterwards, you're going to train your replacement in how to run your precious spy network. Only then will I kill you, Jiraiya. And trust me when I say I am going to kill you. Naruto-kun is dear to me. He's like the son I never got to have. Then again, you had a hand in that, didn't you, Jiraiya? Oh yes, I know what you did." Tsunade gripped Jiraiya by the hair tightly and slammed his head into the floor a few times, listening as he screamed out in pain. "You arranged to have Dan killed, all because you were jealous of him. Hiruzen went along with it for whatever reason he did. Doesn't matter now. Then, when I was grieving, you would come, console me and get some damn from the deal. Only I saw right through your ploy and beat the shit out of you for it. Just like I'm doing now," she said angrily as she slammed his face into the floor 3 more times. "You see, Jiraiya, I found Hiruzen's little black book of secrets. And oh, there were so many secrets. But that's not important right now. You see, you can either do as I command, or I slap a special collar around your neck that prevents you from ever setting foot outside of this village again. No more wandering, no more peeping, no more of your perverted vices. And believe me, I've had one made juiced for you. And if you try to remove it, well, let's just say you'll wish you hadn't. So do I as command, Jiraiya." Jiraiya looked up into Tsunade's eyes and saw that she was dead serious this time. "Still, I'd rather take my chances than let go of the Toad contract. They're all that make me special. Even the Rasengan I learned from Minato. I can't just give them up. And you can't expect me to just give up on my research. My books are bestsellers. Men love my books, and if I can't get any inspiration." Tsunade scowled and stood up, pressing her heel against his head and pushing his face against the floor so hard he felt like his head was going to burst. "Fine then, Shizune." Seeing Shizune rush into the room, the blonde nodded once to her. Get me the collar. It's in my desk. Of course, Tsunade-sama, Shizune exclaimed as she quickly retrieved the item Tsunade had asked for. Handing it over, she watched as Jiraiya began to struggle, trying to throw Tsunade off of him. It was a futile effort though, as she soon got the collar around his neck and activated it. Swiping her blood across a seal on the back of the collar, she grinned maliciously down at him. Now, I recommend you get to training your replacement Jiraiya. I'll be informing the slugs of what you've done, so you can be sure that the toads will have something to say about your negligence. Now, lifting Jiraiya up by his head, she turned and threw him through her window off into the distance, grinning when he landed in the women's side of the hot springs. Clapping her hands together, she turned to smile sweetly at Shizune. That's one problem sort of dealt with. Now, how do we explain what's happened to the people that care about Naruto? Shizune shook her head and frowned sadly at her master. I don't know, Tsunade-sama. Do you think the toads know anything about where Naruto-kun has gone? Maybe. If they do, I don't know if they'll tell us. They're rather fond of Naruto, and if he's safe where he's at. Before they could continue their conversation, Sakura stepped into the room, looking curiously at all the damage, including the broken window, the destroyed walls and floor, etc. Tsunade-sama, I heard Jiraiya was seen in the village. Is Naruto with him? What exactly happened? Tsunade frowned sadly and shook her head. I don't know where Naruto is, Sakura. Something happened while they were gone. Jiraiya neglected his duties and now Naruto is missing. The Pinkett gasped and could feel tears welling up in her eyes. But, he can't be dead, can he? Please tell me he's safe at least. Tsunade smiled at Sakura and said, wherever Naruto is, I'm sure he's fine. We know he's not dead, and it's highly unlikely that the Akatsuki have him. I'm hoping to get some information from the toads once Naruto contacts them. Sakura breathed a sigh of relief and wiped away the tears that had built up in her eyes. Do you think he'll ever come back home? The blonde frowned sadly and shook her head. I don't know, Sakura. I really don't know. Kamza. As Naruto stepped out of the portal, he looked around at his surroundings. Oddly enough, he found himself in the middle of an alley, though it looked a bit strange to him. Not quite sure how to put his finger on it, he stepped out of the alleyway and had a look around. There were a number of large buildings, some of which reminded him of apartment complexes while others looked like genuine houses. Then of course there was a bakery, a restaurant that seemed to serve a variety of fish, and more such places. The thing that caught his attention more than anything, however, was the port he now found himself on. Looking out at the sea, he smiled and took in a breath of fresh air. Ah, that smells like freedom to me, he said with a chuckle. Sounds to me like someone's had some trouble, a feminine voice stated from behind him. Turning around, he saw a beautiful brunette woman dressed rather fashionably. She wore glasses with a red rim on the bottom. This woman also had beautiful brown eyes, but he sensed something was a bit different about her. You could say that. The name's Naruto Uzumaki. Who might you be, miss? Naruto questioned, hoping to get a name from the beautiful woman. Oh, I'm Weedy, royal wedding planner, fashion designer, and good friend of our fair Princess Toki. You don't look like you're from around here. Is everything okay? You can talk to me about it, you know. The now named Weedy suggested, sounding genuinely concerned for him. Before Naruto could say anything, he saw something interesting floating near Weedy's head. Is that a fairy? He asked, genuinely stunned by what he was seeing. Weedy blinked and asked, you can see her? Nobody ever seems to notice her. Yes, this is my fairy friend. You really aren't from around here, are you, Naruto-kun? You're not even from our world, are you? Naruto blinked a couple of times before looking at the fairy and nodding his head in understanding. Your fairy friend is rather smart, being able to surmise that by just a glance. If you don't mind, could we go someplace and talk for a while? I'd like to learn more about this world and where I've ended up. And I'm sure you have plenty of questions for me, as well. The wedding planner nodded and led Naruto to a quaint little house nearby and knocked on the door. When it opened a moment later, Naruto blushed at the sight before him. There before him was one of the most beautiful girls he had ever seen. She was just slightly shorter than he was. She had beautiful red eyes and long, flowing red hair that was tied up in a ponytail in the back. She was wearing a cute top that was red and white in color, and she had on a white skirt that was awfully short, revealing a lot of leg. Or, as he had heard it called, absolute territory. You see, she had on long, black stockings with red boots on her feet. Just the sight of her brought a blush to his face and he was struggling to fight it down. Hello, Weedy. Who's your new friend? The woman asked curiously. Even her voice was beautiful, at least in Naruto's opinion. Weedy smiled and said, Hello Toki-chan. This is Naruto Uzumaki-kun. We have a lot to talk about. Can we please come in? The now named Toki nodded and ushered them in with a kind smile on her face. Shutting the door behind them, she motioned for the two of them to take a seat. As he did, Naruto looked around at the interior design. It was a well-furnished house and it appeared to have a second floor as well as a potential attic. There was a nice kitchen, and the living area was quite spacious. Based on what he had seen before entering the house, there was also a small garden. He wasn't quite sure how to describe the small, cushioned thing he sat on though. It wasn't uncomfortable, but there was no back to it and it was a little on the small side. Regardless, he decided to focus his attention on the other occupants of the house. To his right sat Weedy while Toki sat to his left. Directly across from him were two other young women. The one on Toki's left was a blue-haired girl with her hair done in two long pigtails. Her hair was so long that even with her hair tied up in such a way, it still went well past her butt. There was a rather large ribbon in her hair that looked distinctly like a butterfly. She also had brilliant baby blue eyes that were honestly somewhat mesmerizing for him to peer into. This woman also seemed to radiate a kind of bubbly energy. She looked as if she was having a hard time sitting still. Naruto had to keep himself focused so he didn't peer below her head, because she currently sat with her legs up on the chair she was sitting in, giving a very clear view up her skirt. Whether she noticed this or not, or even if she cared, he wasn't sure. But he wasn't about to be labeled a pervert for sneaking a peek at her panties. Looking at the other girl, the one sitting between Weedy and the blue-haired girl, Naruto immediately got the impression that was the bitchy type. She had long brownish-orange hair and wore a blue cap atop her head. She had green eyes that made him think of Sakura's. She also wore a blue corset-like dress with a white cape of sorts with long white sleeves that opened up at the end, allowing her to conceal things inside her sleeves and retrieve them as needed. At least, that's how Naruto viewed it. Practical uses everybody. Just looking at her and her green eyes, he couldn't help but find her reminiscent of Sakura. The bitchy attitude, the same piercing, green eyes, it was somewhat eerie. This girl was the one to break the silence as she narrowed her eyes at him, looking as if she were already judging him based on appearances alone. So who is this? Your new boyfriend, Weedy? Weedy blushed and quickly shook her head and hands negatively. No. This is my new friend, Naruto Uzumaki-kun. As you can probably see, he's not from here. The orange-haired girl frowned as she looked him over again. Obviously not. Nobody here would ever dress like that. It's atrocious. Naruto scowled at her and said, outfits like this are the only kind I have. I couldn't really afford anything special back where I come from. Besides, you act like I'm lower than dirt or something simply because I'm different. Now, let's try the introduction over again. I am Naruto Uzumaki. You are. Narrowing her eyes at him, the girl was about to go into a tirade before Toki spoke up to try and keep the peace. Reiho. Her name is Reiho. Reiho, please try not to be so rude to our guest, okay? I'm sure he has his reasons. Why don't we hear him out? The now named Reiho just scoffed and looked away, not willing to admit she was in the wrong. So instead, Naruto turned his gaze to the final occupant of the room, or at least, who he thought was the final occupant. His attention was soon grabbed by movement down by his feet. Looking down, he saw, is that a dragon? Like, an actual, living, breathing dragon. Toki nodded and smiled kindly at him as he reached down and began to gently pet her pet. Yes. His name is Drake. He's been my friend for a long time now. Drake doesn't usually like guys very much. He doesn't really get along with my boyfriend all that well. Reiho scowled at this point and said, I still don't see what you see in that chickweed. As far as I'm concerned, he's just a pervert that doesn't respect you like he should. I don't care how nice he seems, I don't trust him. The princess just sighed and shook her head. Zack's not a bad person. Yes, he may have some character flaws, but he's sweet and charming too. I'm sure he genuinely loves me. You'll see, Reiho, someday. Naruto frowned as he listened silently to the conversation taking place between the two women. He had a bad feeling that he wasn't going to like this Zack person that Toki was in a relationship with. It was just a gut feeling, but he always trusted his gut. Ignoring that for the time being, he looked straight into the eyes of the blue-haired girl and asked, so what's your name? You look like you're ready to burst out into song or something at any second. The girl blinked a couple of times before shooting up in her chair and shouting, that's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? You're a genius, Naruto-kun. Oh. Sitting down again, she leaned forward and looked into his eyes deeply. I'm Enda. Nice to meet you, Naruto-kun. I wonder, if I break out into song, what should I sing? Decisions. Naruto chuckled a bit and said, I can tell that I'm going to really like you, Enda-chan. I hope we get to be the very best of friends. As Naruto smiled kindly at her, Enda nodded excitedly and said, I'm looking forward to it, Naruto-kun. We're going to have so much fun together. Just you wait and see. Toki looked between Naruto and Weedy for a moment before she asked, so Weedy, what's going on? It must be important if you're bringing a guy you just met to see us. Weedy looked at Naruto for a moment before turning her gaze to her friends. Naruto-kun isn't from this world. He comes from another time and place, somewhere completely different than our world. I'm not sure of the details exactly, but my fairy friend trusts him, and so do I. I don't think he means any of us any harm. The girl's eyes widened in shock at this before Reiho turned to him. Is that true? Do you really come from another world? Why the heck do you choose to come here? Naruto sighed and rubbed the back of his head. Ootsie, in order to explain all of that, I kind of need to start at the beginning. And it's going to be a long story. So before we begin, is there any chance we can get some refreshments of some kind? Toki nodded and she quickly went off with Reiho to get the required refreshments. Once they were gone, Enda began to look at Naruto curiously. Sue, you're like an alien or something. Like the beep boop beep kind. Where's the tentacles and nifty ray guns and stuff, huh? The blonde blinked in stupefaction for a moment before chuckling softly. Shaking his head, he said, no, I'm not an alien of any kind. I'm a human, like you and your friends. Only, slightly different, it would seem. Enda simply hummed in disappointment. That's a shame. I've always wanted to meet an alien and see what they were like. You're still cute though. Blushing slightly, Naruto chuckled some more before rubbing the back of his head again. Thanks, Enda-chan. I think you're pretty cute too. You're pretty too. He admitted aloud. Enda blushed a deep shade of red at this and quickly began poking her fingers together shyly, like he had seen Hinata do so often in the past. Smiling at her, he was about to say something else when they were interrupted. Oh ho, trying to seduce dear Enda-chan already, are you? Reiho questioned as she sat down again, placing a tray of tea before them on the round table. Naruto blushed slightly and said, not really. I'm just speaking the truth. Enda-chan is honestly really pretty. At least I think so. Toki smiled at him as she placed a tray of cookies down for them all to snack on. That's very sweet of you, Naruto-kun. Thank you. Now, you said that you have a long story for us. We're willing to listen and help, if we're able. Thanks, Toki-chan. He said gratefully. Looking around into everyone's eyes, he soon reached up and untied his headband before placing it on the table, allowing his bangs to fall freely and frame his face nicely. I come from a land called the Elemental Nations on a planet called Earth. I don't know all the exact details, as our history is kind of muddled in myths and rumors with very little facts being known about the time before ninjutsu. Anyways, supposedly, a great sage called the Sage of Six Paths is the one who gave my people the power of something called chakra. It's our very life energy, and we can use our chakra to do a lot of different things. We can spit fireballs, create clones of ourselves, some people can even fly. The Sage of Six Paths also created the 9 Biju. The Biju are creatures of immense power and beings made of pure chakra. They cannot be killed, and the only way to truly beat them is to seal them within an object, or a person. Sighing heavily, he brushed his fingers through his hair and continued with his tale. Anyways, the people that had a Biju sealed within them are called Jinchuriki, or power of human sacrifice. There's the Aikibi, the Nibi, the Sanbi, Yanbi, Gobi, Rokubi, Nanabi, Hachibi, and the Kyubi. The more tails a Biju has, the more powerful it is. Naturally, this makes the Kyubi the strongest of the bunch. Frowning deeply, he looked into their eyes again and continued on once more. Fast forward a ways and you have the founding of the village I come from, Konohagakure. A man by the name of Hashirama Senju and his friend rival Madara Uchiha, along with Mito Uzumaki, helped found the village together. There were a number of hidden villages, though the 5 major villages were Konohagakure, Sungakure, Kumogakure, Kurigakure, and Iwagakure. As I said, I am from Konohagakure. Anyways, there were constant wars between clans before the founding of the great ninja villages. After that, Hashirama Senju did battle with Madara and Mito sealed the Kyubi within herself during said battle. Hashirama then divided the Biju and traded them away like pets, teaching the other villages how to seal the Biju. It was his great idea of how to make peace with everyone. All that happened is they found a new use for their Jinchuriki, war. One thing you need to know about Jinchuriki is that they aren't born, they're made. And when the people seal the Biju within someone, making them a Jinchuriki, they're almost always treated like monsters. My friend Gaara had numerous attempts on his life because his wonderful father wanted to have a strong weapon. And, as you may have guessed, I'm a Jinchuriki as well. Sighing softly, he soon took a sip of his tea to wet his tongue and throat some before he continued. On the night of my birth, the Kyubi attacked Konohagakure. I have my theories, but I can't prove anything. Never could, really. Anyways, the 4th Hokage, a man named Minato Namikaze, sealed the Kyubi within me. I carry the strongest of the 9 Biju within me. Anyways, continuing on, I was mistreated in numerous ways. Being sold rotten food and milk for ridiculous prices, being forced to dig through trash cans for scraps of food, I was chased by mobs out for my blood, and I was beaten. Numerous times they tried to kill me thinking that I am the Kyubi. I didn't have any friends growing up. I never really had anyone that I could call a friend or a loved one. I was always treated like I didn't matter, and if I started to prove that I could make something of myself and be better than what they wanted me to be, things got bad. So I had to pretend to be a loudmouthed idiot that could barely tie his shoelaces. Nobody could see through my mask that I put up. After some time, I finally became a shinobi of the village. This happened 2 years ago, when I was 15. I thought I could finally cast aside my mask, but then I was put on a team with Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Kakashi Hatake. The only person our sensei cared for was Sasuke, and if I had shown that I even had a little potential to be better than the village's golden boy, Sasuke, it would have ended badly for me. I couldn't get the type of training I had wanted, and I had to be that team's whipping boy, essentially. I was not respected or treated well on that team. Anyways, as time went on, I found that I had even fewer people in Konoha that cared about me than I thought. Which was pretty much to say nobody really did. At least, not until I left with a man called Jiraiya to retrieve the person that would be our new Hokage, Tsunade Senju. When I first met her, Tsunade was nothing more than a drunken old hag, and trust me, that's putting it mildly. I was disappointed in her and made sure she knew it too. I managed to help her overcome her fears and her own personal demons, and she came back to be the new Hokage. She and Shizune, her assistant, are the only ones that ever really saw the real me. They loved me for me, and I appreciated it. However, sighing again, Naruto took another sip of tea before he continued on. Sasuke Uchiha, I won't delve too much into his backstory. The main thing you should know about him is that he was the last of his clan and he had both a superiority and an inferiority complex. He was arrogant and full of himself, and yet he never felt like he was strong enough. The moment anyone showed they were better than him, he'd become frustrated and lash out. Well, one day he left to go and seek power from a man called Orochimaru. Sasuke craved power and would do absolutely anything for it. I was sent on a mission to retrieve him and bring him back by any means necessary. But, while Sasuke was attempting to kill me, I held back. I knew that if I hurt him too badly, the councils would demand my blood. I had to make a choice between beating him to a bloody pulp and dragging him back that way, or letting him nearly kill me in our fight so he could escape to Orochimaru. I chose the latter of the two options. Here, Naruto held up a finger, telling them to wait. Lifting up his shirt, which made the girls blush something awful, he showed them his scar. Once they had seen it, he put his shirt back in place and said, "Sasuke broke my neck during our fight. He also stabbed me through the chest in the place you just saw not just once, but twice with a technique Kakashi taught him called the Chidori. It's an assassination technique, but damn is it ever loud." Anyways, once Sasuke was gone, Jiraiya decided he would take me on a 3-year training trip to hopefully make me strong enough to fight a group of baddies that were after me known as the Akatsuki. They wanted to capture all the Jinchuriki so they could extract their Biju for themselves, though I don't know the reason why. But, the process ends up killing the Jinchuriki. So, if, say for instance that I was captured and had the Kyuubi ripped out of me, I'd die. I had a lot of people out for my blood for one reason or another. So I had sincerely hoped that Jiraiya would take my training seriously and really prepare me to fight against the people that were after me. But there's one important thing you should know about Jiraiya: he's a self-proclaimed super pervert. He writes smut books for a living. That's literally all they are, is smut scene after smut scene. There's no plot, no character development, just pure smut. Grumbling for a while, he soon continued on. Anyways, he did something that he called research for his books. What this entailed is him peeking on women while they were bathing in the hot springs or when they were being intimate with their significant other. He would watch everything, jotting down notes and then using said women's measurements and appearances in his books. Jiraiya is pretty much the definition of a scumbag. Seeing the looks of disgust on their faces, Naruto nodded and said, "I hate perverts with a passion. I'll admit, I can be a bit perverted at times, and I'll admit when I find a woman attractive, but I will never stoop to the level of guys like him." Well, during the training trip, he wasn't even trying to teach me anything. Instead, he took off every chance he got so he could go and peep on women for his precious research. So I took all of his books and notes on an art called Fuinjutsu. After studying for some time and learning that I was quite adept at the art, I created a seal that would take me out of the elemental nations into a whole new world. And so, I ended up here, in your fine city. And I just realized I don't even know the name of the city yet. Wow. Toki giggled a bit and said, "You're in the castle town of Kamsa. This is my house. Technically I'm a princess, but I like the idea of living out here amongst my people. The castle can be a bit stuffy sometimes. Naruto blinked a couple of times and said, "Wow. Can't say I was expecting to meet another princess here. Very nice to meet you, Toki-chan. Or, should I call you Toki-sama? Toki-hime. Toki-chan is fine, Naruto-kun," the redhead said. "It sounds like you've been through a lot. Would you mind answering some of our questions?" The blue-eyed teen shrugged and said, "Sure. I don't mind answering if I can. What's on your mind?" Toki frowned at him and asked, "Can anyone else come through from your world? I don't want my kingdom to be in danger from people that are after you." "Oh, don't worry, I have no intention of kicking you out or anything, I just want to be sure nobody can get here and hurt anyone." Naruto shook his head and said, "I highly doubt anyone will ever come here. The seal I used was set to burn to a crisp and the ashes were to be blown away with the wind. Even if somebody was watching me, they'd never be able to replicate the seal. I made sure to take every precaution necessary to ensure it couldn't be copied, even by someone that might have been watching me. To outside viewers, the seal would appear blurry and wobbly and they wouldn't be able to make it out." Shrugging, he picked up a cookie and took a bit. Moaning in delight, he quickly finished it before saying, "Oh Kami, these are delicious. Did you two make these? They're amazing." Toki giggled again and said, "Yes, Reiho and I made both the cookies and the tea you've been drinking. I'm glad you enjoy them. And, I'm glad nobody can follow you, Naruto-kun. From the sounds of it, I don't know if we have the kind of power needed to fend off these people that are after you." "That makes sense. Like I said, don't worry too much about it. Anywho, any other questions?" Enda shot her hand up into the air and said, "Ooh. Me. Can you show us any neat ninja tricks? Like whoosh and bam and hia?" Naruto chuckled softly as he watched Enda. "She sure is full of energy. I like her," he thought to himself with a smile. After a time, he held up his right hand and formed a Rasengan and held it out for each of them to see. When Enda went to touch it, he dispelled the technique and wagged his finger at her. "Nah, that's a technique called the Rasengan. It grinds and tears away at anything it touches. Chances are, it would have torn your finger to shreds just by touching it." The blue-haired girl blinked owlishly for a time before saying simply, "Well, that could have been bad. I don't want to lose a finger." The blonde chuckled a bit and said, "Neither do I. So, anything else?" Weedy decided to ask, "How is it you can see my fairy friend when everyone else has such a hard time making her out?" Naruto blinked a couple of times at her strange question. "You mean, nobody else can see her? But she's literally right there. Then again, nobody seemed to be reacting to her, huh? Weird. I don't know why I'm able to see her, Weedy-chan. I just know I can." Reiho frowned in confusion. "Wait, so you're telling me there's an actual fairy there? Weedy's not just acting all spacey and airheaded when she talks about a fairy friend." Weedy pouted cutely and said, "That's not very nice. I've always been honest. I'll admit I'm kind of a klutz and I can be a bit odd sometimes, but I'd never lie to any of you about something like this." Naruto reached over and placed a gentle hand upon Weedy's, giving it a gentle squeeze. "It's okay, Weedy-chan. If it helps any, I think your friend is a cute little thing. I'm personally glad I can see her." "Thank you, Naruto-kun," Weedy said with a happy smile on her face. Oh, I know. Did you have a significant other back where you're from? Or were you really all alone? Because that sounds really sad." Naruto chuckled dryly and shook his head. "No significant other of any kind. No one really interested me either. I don't know if anyone did like me, but it doesn't matter. I want to start a new life here and be happy with new friends. Maybe a girlfriend, settle down, get married, and live a normal, happy life. I don't want to have to always look over my shoulder. I don't want to have to fight all the time. I want to live in peace and be with people I love." "Then you should live with one of us. We'd be glad to keep you company, Naruto-kun. We'll be your bestest friends and you'll never have to be lonely ever again. In fact, you can just move in with me." Enda exclaimed, sounding as cheerful as ever. Naruto blushed deeply at the thought of living with Enda. Before he could say anything, however, Reiho spoke up. Enda, you can't be serious. You barely know him. What if he's a pervert, like that Jiraiya guy he talked about? Hearing this, the blonde scowled and looked down, his hair shadowing his eyes. I am nothing like Jiraiya. I hate that man with a passion. I already said that I have some perverted thoughts every now and again, but I'm not the kind to act on perversions. I treat people with respect. Especially women. As far as I'm concerned, women are stronger than men in a number of ways and they are definitely worthy of respect. Reiho frowned slightly, but nodded in acceptance. Oh, very well. But still, isn't it a little sudden, Enda? Enda shook her head and said with a bright smile on her face, not at all. Naruto-kun needs a home and I'm willing to provide one for him. We can be roommates. Maybe he could even help me get my hair just right. We can sing and dance and play all day long if we want to. I trust him, Reiho. Naruto smiled in thanks. Thank you so much, Enda-chan. I won't betray your trust. I promise. And one thing about me that will never change is that I don't break a promise. Well, except for one, sighing, he rubbed the back of his head and shook it off. Never mind. I'm not going to dwell on that. Toki smiled and said, well, I think we've asked enough of you by now. I think it's time we start to tell you a little about our world. First, you should know that you're in the kingdom of Kamza and, as I said, you're in the castle town of Kamza. I'm the princess of the kingdom. There's a big, wide world out there and it's inhabited by a lot of, monsters. Undead, robots, assassins, golems, etc. If you ever venture outside of Kamza, you'll see what I mean. And in this world, there's magic instead of this chakra thing you talked about. For instance, I've been trained in combat using a rifle and a dagger. I also have the ability to cast a variety of powerful magic spells. I can fling fireballs, rain lightning down on my enemies, and I even have the ability to use time magic. Hopefully I never have to make use of that though. Naruto chuckled wryly as he looked at Toki. You probably just jinxed yourself, Toki-chan. The redhead giggled somewhat abashedly before she decided to continue. Anyways, there's really not too much to tell. There's 4 sages, each within their own garden off to the northeast of Kamza. There's a bunch of islands out at sea that you can visit if you'd like, especially if you're interested in catching some unique kinds of fish. What else is there? Oh, there's a wonderful bakery down by the docks. You can get the most delectable sweets there. Though, the owner and his employees are a little eccentric. Weedy giggled a bit at that before looking into Naruto's eyes and saying, if you have any questions for any of us, we'll be happy to answer. But for now, I think the best thing you can do is walk around the city and get a feel for it yourself. First though, Enda should show you to her house where you'll be staying. Before Enda could say anything in confirmation, the front door opened and a man called out, Toki-chan. I'm home. Looking at the man, warning bells immediately went off in Naruto's head. He stood just as tall as Naruto at an even 6 feet tall and he was slightly muscular as well, which showed he definitely worked out some. This man had dark blue hair and blue eyes and was dressed like a typical medieval knight. As Toki hurried over to him and threw her arms around him, planting a kiss on his lips, Naruto could feel something snapping in his mind. All that he could see was Jiraiya's image plastered over this man's. Immediately he knew that this man was a pervert on the same level as Jiraiya, and that immediately put him on his shit list. As the man approached them, he paused when he saw Naruto sitting in his usual seat. Toki-chan, who is this and why is he sitting in my spot? Naruto put on a fake smile, one that the girls easily saw through, and stood up, moving aside to allow the man to have his spot. Instead, Naruto sat down on a nearby couch and set Drake down in his lap. I already don't like this guy and I don't even know him yet. Oh, if only Naruto knew just how bad this man was, he'd realize that his first impression of this man was spot on. He'd better not hurt Toki-chan. Zack found himself frowning as he watched Toki's new friend play with Drake. The damn thing never did like him, so seeing the miniature dragon getting along so well with this newcomer was a tad frustrating. Who the hell is this guy anyways? Toki and the others smiled as they saw how well Drake was getting along with Naruto. Drake was generally a good judge of character, so seeing him get along so well with their new friend was a pleasant sight to see. However, Toki couldn't help but wonder something. Why was it that Drake never got along with her boyfriend? The answer was obvious to her friends, but Toki remained ever oblivious to the truth about her boyfriend. Reiho couldn't help but smile at the scene. I'm impressed, Naruto. Drake's taken quite the liking to you. He doesn't usually like other people all that much. Naruto smiled as he started to tickle Drake. Well, I'm glad he likes me. You're such a cute little guy, aren't you, Drake? You and I are going to be great friends, aren't we? He questioned before placing a kiss on Drake's nose. Zack frowned deeper before turning to Toki. So who's your new friend, Toki-chan? And why is he here? Reiho and the others frowned at him. It was obvious to everyone but Toki that Zack didn't like the fact that another guy had come into their lives. Or more specifically, Toki's life. However, Toki was ever oblivious to the truth about her boyfriend. His name's Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto-san came here from, far away. Oh, what was the name of that place you told me about? Thinking on it for a time, Toki furrowed her brow before the name finally came to her. Japan. That's it. Yeah, Naruto-san is from Japan. He doesn't have a home here, and he doesn't plan to go back home either. So Indus decided to let him live with her. I do so hope you and Naruto-san can become friends, Zack-kun. Zack and Naruto looked at one another before saying as one, not likely. Reiho, Enda, and Weedy each blinked in shock at how quickly they both dismissed one another. However, they had to side with Naruto on this one. Zack just rubbed the three of them in the wrong way. While Enda and Weedy would never say anything negative about him in front of Toki, they weren't exactly fond of Zack. Reiho, on the other hand, was much more vocal about her dislike of Zack. She oftentimes used the names of weeds when talking about him. Naruto, on the other hand, she felt she might be able to get along with. Especially if he shared the same dislike of Zack that she did. Toki, on the other hand, frowned sadly and asked, why not? I think you two could be really good friends if you at least tried. Zack shook his head and said, sorry Toki-chan, but something just doesn't feel right about this guy. I don't want him near you or your friends. What if he's a bad guy? What would you do then? Naruto scowled and said, Toki-chan, I'm sorry. I don't mean to upset you. But this boyfriend of yours reminds me way too much of Jiraiya. I cannot be friends with someone like this. I'm sorry to have troubled you. When Naruto stood up and walked towards the front door, the redhead frowned and said, you don't have to leave. Why not stay and talk for a while longer? The blonde simply shook his head and went to leave the house, only to blink when he felt something tugging on his pants leg. Looking down, he saw Drake was trying to make him stay. Smiling softly at the miniature dragon, Naruto kneeled down and petted him atop his head. Don't worry, Drake. I'll still be around. I just can't be near him. Drake let out a growl before licking Naruto's cheek. Sorry, little guy, Naruto said before stepping outside. However, Drake followed him out and flew around the blonde's head. Drake, come on, little guy. You don't want to leave Toki-chan alone with that guy, do you? As much as I'd love to keep playing with you, you need to stay with Toki-chan. Okay. Toki came outside, closing the door behind her. Looking into Naruto's eyes searchingly, she asked, what do you mean he reminds you of Jiraiya? In what way? Wasn't this Jiraiya a bad guy? The blonde sighed and gently hugged Drake close to his chest. Looking deep into Toki's eyes, he said, you wouldn't believe me, even if I told you. Sorry Toki-chan, I get the same feeling from Zack as I did from Jiraiya. That's all I'll say on the subject. I don't want to upset you and I don't want you to slap me, so I won't say any more. Handing Drake back to Toki, Naruto turned and began walking off. Frowning sadly, Toki wanted to say something, but she found that she couldn't. As Naruto disappeared around a corner, she looked down at Drake and asked, "How is Zack-kun like Jiraiya?" "Zack-kun's better than him, right Drake?" Drake glared into her eyes before shaking his head negatively. Squirming in his master's arms, he soon escaped her grip and flew off in search of Naruto. Not sure quite how to react, Toki frowned sadly as she re-entered her home and took her seat once again. Reiho frowned sadly at her and asked, "Where's Drake? Naruto did give him back to you before he left, right?" The redhead shook her head sadly and said, "Drake took off after Naruto. He doesn't usually take to new people well, especially men. I didn't expect this to happen." Looking around at her friends, Toki said, "Before he left, Naruto said that Zack-kun reminds him of Jiraiya. Way too much, apparently." But, looking into her beloved's eyes, Toki asked, "You're nothing like Jiraiya, right Zack-kun? You'd never do the things Jiraiya did. Right?" The blue-eyed man frowned in confusion and asked, "Who's Jiraiya? And why would me being like him be such a bad thing? Who even was that guy anyways?" Reiho scowled at him and said, "Like Toki-chan said, his name is Naruto Uzumaki and he came here from Japan. He came here with pretty much nothing besides the clothes and whatever else he had on him. Weedy was concerned about him, so she brought him here to see us. Apparently he's been through a lot and hasn't exactly had his best life. Jiraiya hurt him in a deep way. And, he was a self-proclaimed super pervert. Let's just say, you and Jiraiya would get along really, really well." Toki frowned sadly at her boyfriend and asked, "You're not really a pervert too, are you? You're always so nice to me and my friends." Zack chuckled somewhat nervously before saying, "Of course not, sweetie. What would ever give you that idea? I've got nothing but respect for you and your lady friends here. I'd never do something that would hurt you or make you feel uncomfortable." Toki smiled happily at him and said, "I knew you couldn't be anything like that guy. I trust you Zack-kun. Still, I wonder why Drake acts the way he does around you and Naruto. It doesn't make any sense." Reiho, who had been taking a sip of her tea at that moment, suddenly spit it all out before staring at Toki in shock. "You actually believe this crabgrass? Toki, you can't seriously be blind to this guy's true nature, right? He's a big pervert." Naruto, on the other hand, actually respects us and didn't even try to peek at Enda's choice of underwear when she had her feet up on the chair. The entire time he looked all of us in the eyes and didn't stray once. This guy on the other hand. Toki frowned sadly at Reiho and shook her head. "Zack-kun's not like that. You don't understand him like I do. Zack-kun would never do anything to hurt me. Naruto's a nice guy, and Drake likes him, but I'm sure Drake will come around and see the good things about Zack-kun too someday. I trust Zack-kun." The orange-haired girl gawked at Toki and said, "Toki, come on, you." The beautiful redhead shook her head and said, "Please Reiho. Just stop, okay? I know you don't like Zack-kun, but he's my boyfriend. If I can't trust in him, how can our relationship work? Zack-kun would never hurt me. So please, stop." Reiho scowled before leveling a fierce glare on the blue-haired knight. Without a word, she got up and left the house. When Enda and Weedy joined her outside soon after, the orange-haired girl looked at them before saying, "I want to find Naruto. Any idea where he might have gone?" Enda frowned and shook her head. "Not a clue. I don't think he left Kamsa. Why don't we split up and look for him? If one of us finds him, maybe whistle really loudly to show the others where he is." Weedy shook her head. "No, I don't want to disturb him if he's busy. I think we should search together. It might take a little longer, but it's better than losing track of him or disturbing him somehow." Reiho sighed in frustration before she started walking off in a random direction. When Enda and Weedy hurried after her, She giggled lightly to herself when Weedy tripped over nothing and fell down. Poor Weedy. Naruto. Naruto frowned as he wandered into the small forest on the edge of Kamsa. He knew Drake had decided to follow him, and he hoped he wasn't leading the small dragon into danger. So far, the monsters he had seen in the forest were all pretty docile and didn't attack him or Drake, so Naruto chose to leave them alone. Stepping out into a small clearing, he figured this would be the perfect spot to test things out. First though, turning around, Naruto waved at Drake. "Come on over here, Drake. It's safe enough," he said with a smile. When Drake flew up to him a moment later, Naruto petted his head for a moment before he turned to the center of the clearing. "All right, time to run a little test." Biting his thumb hard enough to draw blood, he soon flashed through hand seals before calling out, "Summoning technique." In a poof of smoke, two small toads appeared. One was green with a white head of hair and a prominent beard. The other was a pale yellow color with purple hair and a purple mouth. These were the great sages of Mount Myoboku, and they were exactly the toads he was hoping to see. Bowing to them, he said, "It is great to see you again, Ma." Fukasaku looked at the small dragon first before resting his gaze on Naruto. Shima, meanwhile, was looking around curiously. After a moment, Fukasaku said, "It's good to see you again, Naruto boy. Tell me, where exactly are we?" Naruto sat down and put Drake in his lap. "Well, as you know, Jiraiya wasn't taking my training seriously at all. So I dabbled in Fuinjutsu, using all the books and information he had on the subject. It didn't take very long for me to realize that I picked up on Fuinjutsu quickly. It came to me so easily and it all made perfect sense. Anyways, since Jiraiya wouldn't take my training seriously, and because he just didn't care, I spent some time thinking very carefully about my life in the elemental nations. Anyways, I determined that hardly anyone actually cared about me and my life wasn't exactly all that great back there. I feel bad about leaving behind the people that did care about me, but, looking between the two toad elders, he smiled sadly and said, I had to leave. I created a seal that would bring me to a new world and possibly a new dimension. I don't really know how far I am from the elemental nations, but I don't really care, so long as I can be away from everything there. I want to build a new home in a new world away from all the pain, hatred, and misery in the elemental nations. I wanted true friends and people I could genuinely love." Shima frowned sadly and walked up to Naruto, patting him gently on the cheek. "We understand, sweetheart. It's a shame, but there's nothing that can be done about it now. Tsunade-chan had her slugs get in touch with us a few days ago. She told us absolutely everything, even how she's punishing Jiraiya for, in her words, being such an asshole. Apparently Jiraiya blames you for Minato-kun's death. If you had never been born, both Minato-kun and his wife wouldn't have died. At least, that's how he feels about it." Seeing Naruto's fists clenching in anger, Fukasaku smiled sadly and said, "Naruto boy, I've got a proposition for ya. You see, we've removed Jiraiya's name from our summoning contract. We want nothing to do with that foolish boy anymore. So for now, you are our sole summoner and rightful holder of the Toad summoning contract. We would like for you to visit Mount Myoboku sometimes so we can begin training you in the art of Senjutsu. Jiraiya never mastered the sage arts, nor did he really care to. Minato-kun never got the chance to practice the art of Senjutsu. But you, M-boy, we've got full faith that you can master sage training. At the same time, we'll train you in absolutely everything we can think of. We'll teach you the frog kata taijutsu style. We'll also teach you everything we can about Fuinjutsu, as your parents both dabbled in the art quite a bit. And we'll even test your chakra affinity so we know what we should do to get you started on the right training exercises. We've got a lot we can teach you, and we'll even talk to Tsunade-chan about getting you various jutsu and chakra-related scrolls and teachings. Finally, we'll tell you all about your parents, your clan, and pretty much anything else you'd like to know." What we want in exchange is for you to show us more about this new world you've found yourself in. Summon us on occasion so we can have a little look-see. And, if you want, we'll even allow whomever you want to sign the Toad contract and summon us. Perhaps any children you might have someday would suffice. Or maybe a girlfriend, once you make one. Do the people of this world even have chakra? Everything in nature is saturated with it, no matter where you go. But we don't know anything about the people here. Fukasaku said, scratching at his chin. Naruto smiled at the two toads and said, I'd like that very much. And there's a few really pretty, really nice girls here. I'd love to get to know them better, but I wouldn't say there's any crushes or anything just yet. I did just meet them, after all. Chuckling, he petted Drake some more before saying, I promise I'll do what I can, Pa. I won't let you two down. As for if they can use chakra or not in some way, looking at the pathway that extended from the clearing, he smirked at seeing Reiho, Enda, and Weedy watching him. Why not see for yourself? Girls, it's okay. Please come here. When the girls started walking towards him, Naruto saw what was about to happen. Using the body flicker technique, he appeared near Weedy, catching her as she tripped over a small branch in the path. When he realized where his hand was, he quickly helped her stand straight again before removing it with a deep blush on his face. Sorry Weedy-chan. I didn't want you to get hurt, so oh dear. Please forgive me, he exclaimed, bowing to Weedy. Weedy was blushing furiously. Naruto had accidentally grabbed one of hers when he caught her. While she knew others would have gotten upset with him, the brunette knew he didn't mean anything by it. And it was such a tender touch. Something about it made her smile to herself. Looking Naruto in the eyes, she said, It's okay, Naruto-kun. You didn't mean to. Thank you for catching me. Now, who are your friends? They seem like really nice little toads. Reiho frowned at the fact that Weedy had let Naruto get away with copping a feel. However, even she had to admit that he didn't do it on purpose. He had helped Weedy, so she would let him off the hook just this once. Turning her attention to the toads, she decided to get introductions out of the way. Since it's only polite for us to introduce ourselves first, before asking for your names, I am Reiho. That's Enda, and this is Weedy. It's a pleasure to meet you. Shima smiled kindly at the girl and said, a youngling with good manners. I like you girly. My name is Shima and this is my husband, Fukasaku. We're the sages of Mount Myoboku. We're good friends of Naruto-kun's. Tell me, what do you think of Naruto-kun, Reiho blinked a couple of times at the sudden question. Looking at the blonde, she saw him blushing in embarrassment. When she realized what Shima was doing, the green-eyed woman blushed prettily and exclaimed, and no. We only just met, how am I supposed to know what to think of him? Sure, he seems nice, but I still worry. What if he's not the kind of guy I'd want to spend time with? I mean, we already have to deal with that piece of ragweed. We don't need another person like him. Fukasaku and Shima blinked in confusion before Naruto decided to clear the air for them. She's talking about Toki-chan's boyfriend, Zack. As soon as I saw him, all I could think of was that he's this world's version of Jiraiya. He's a super pervert, just like that old bastard. I worry about Toki-chan, if she's planning to be with a guy like that. And Rei-chan, I've already told you I'm not like Jiraiya or Zack. I promise I'm not. Speaking of promises, whatever happened to that promise you made that Sakura girl? Shima questioned him. Naruto sighed and scratched the back of his head. That's one promise I'm going to have to break, I'm afraid. I know I come through with all my promises, but you have to admit that that was one promise I never should have made. If I hadn't been trying to keep my promise to her, I wouldn't have lost so badly to Sasuke. I was trying everything to subdue and capture him so I could drag him back to Konoha for her. Meanwhile, he was trying to murder me. If I had just fought him more seriously and didn't have to worry about not breaking him or something, I could have won that fight and dragged him back that way. Doesn't help that the people practically worship the jackass. Sighing heavily again, he said, when you guys go to see Tsunade, can you tell her to pass on a message to Sakura from me? Tell her I'm sorry, but I'm not going to keep the promise I made to her. I just hope she doesn't blow up at you guys or Tsunade. Fukasaku nodded and said, sure M'boy, we can do that. Now, let's see here. Closing his eyes, Fukasaku tried to sense for any signs of chakra in Naruto's new friends. Frowning slightly, he shook his head and said, they don't possess chakra. They have another source of energy inside of them, however. If they could somehow tap into this energy of theirs, they might be able to make use of the contract. We'd have to alter things a bit to accept this energy of theirs, but I'm sure we can pull that off, no problem. Tell me, would any of you girls care to be a summoner of the toads just like Naruto boy here? Enda immediately shot her hand into the air and cheered. Yep, that sounds like it might be kinda fun. What would I have to do? Shima chuckled softly before she hopped up to Enda. Summoning the contract into her hands, she unrolled it and pointed to a blank space underneath Naruto's name. Sign your name in blood, leave your handprint here, and then, once we've got this whole energy business figured out, we'll teach you how to summon us. It'll have to be slightly different from how Naruto-kun does it, but I'm sure you'll get the hang of it. Ooh, sounds neato. Okie dokie, just a little blood, right? Looking at Naruto, she saw the weapons stored in a holster and said, Naru, can I borrow one of those nifty pointy thingies? A kunai, sure thing, Naruto said before he took one of his throwing weapons and put it in her hand. Be careful with it. Don't want to accidentally chop off a finger or something. Nodding in thanks, Enda proceeded to prick her right index finger before doing as Shima instructed. Once she was done, she grinned and jumped up and down in place, giggling to herself. Yay, I'll get to summon cute little toadies to play with. When Enda accidentally let go of the kunai in her excitement, Naruto saw where it was headed. Quickly appearing in front of Reiho, he caught the kunai by the tip, mere inches from his chest. Breathing a sigh of relief, he put the kunai away and said, gotta be more careful with things like that, Enda-chan. Enda gasped as she realized what she had done. Hurrying over to Reiho's side, she began looking her over from top to bottom. Are you okay, Reiho? I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. And you? Looking at Naruto, she grinned at him. You are awesome. All zippy. In one place and then in another faster than anyone can see. Vroom. Naruto chuckled before turning around and looking in Reiho's eyes. Are you okay, Rei-chan? You're not hurt anywhere, are you? Reiho knew she was blushing, but she couldn't help it. For a while, she remained silent as she tried to get her heart to stop beating so fast. After she had managed to calm herself down, she said, I'm fine. Thank you for saving me, Naruto-kun. And Enda, you really need to calm down sometimes. You could have hurt yourself or one of us if Naruto-kun wasn't here. Fukasaku and Shima smirked at one another and nodded in agreement with one another. Reiho had just developed a crush on their blonde summoner. Giggling to themselves, Fukasaku looked into Naruto's eyes and said, Naruto boy, we still have much to discuss. So why don't you sit down with your friends and we can talk things out for a while? Naruto nodded and sat down, putting Drake in his lap once again. When Reiho and Enda sat beside him, he was initially confused for a moment before he simply shrugged it off. Then, the two of them grabbed his hands and intertwined their fingers with his. Blushing, he would have said something, but decided against it in the end. Shima smiled at the interaction between Naruto and the girls. When everyone had settled in, she began to speak. Naruto-kun, your mother was a wonderful woman going by the name Kushina Uzumaki. She was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki before you were. In fact, she was only the second Kyuubi Jinchuriki, making you the third. The first was Mito Uzumaki, wife of the first Hokage. Kushina was such a sweet young thing with crimson hair, violet eyes, and just the sweetest disposition. Of course, Like you, she also had a nasty temper whenever someone made fun of her for any reason. Especially if they called her tomato or made fun of her red hair in general. Fukasaku took over at this point. You are one of the last surviving members of the once great Uzumaki clan. They resided in the village of Uzushiogakure and were great allies of Konoha throughout the wars. Unfortunately, they were almost entirely wiped out. It's strange though, considering the island they lived on was protected by fuinjutsu and natural defenses such as whirlpools to prevent any ships from landing on their shore. Unless, of course, you knew the trick to get into the village. Naruto scowled at this and said, sounds to me like they were betrayed then. And considering the fact that the academy doesn't teach anything about the Uzumaki clan or even Mito and Kushina Uzumaki, I'm willing to bet a certain old bastard on the council had something to do with it. The green toad nodded and said, we came to that same conclusion. However, without proof, it's not possible to act against Danzo or his allies. Of course not. Naruto grumbled out, I doubt you'll find any either. That man's way too good at hiding his tracks. If he had his way, Konoha would be at war all the time until either Konoha was destroyed or Konoha ruled the entirety of the elemental nations. He's pretty much the definition of pure evil. We agree. But enough about that, Shima said, deciding to try and move on so they wouldn't dwell on such a negative topic. Your father is someone you probably already guessed. Minato Namikaze, 4th Hokage of Konohagakure. Naruto shrugged and said, yeah, I kinda figured as much. I mean, we look a lot alike. Same hair, same eyes, same kind of build, body type. But the biggest clue is that he wouldn't just use any child. Who would willingly give up their son to become the next Kyuubi Jinchuriki? So he used his own child to hold the beast. Fukasaku nodded and said, knowing your parents as we do, we know something happened on the night of your birth. Somebody had to have let the Kyuubi free from your mother. Your parents were far too skilled with fuinjutsu to fail in their efforts to keep the Kyuubi contained while Kushina gave birth to you. So somebody unleashed the Kyuubi on Konoha, but I don't know why or who it could have been. One thing we're certain of is that it had to have been an Uchiha. One on Madara's level. Makes sense. The Sharingan is capable of bending targets to their will and making them do things they wouldn't do otherwise. So, it wasn't just the Kyuubi then that killed my parents, it was an Uchiha as well. Can't say I was expecting that, Naruto said as he gently squeezed the hands of the girls beside him. Their support in this instance was nice. Fukasaku smiled at the interaction between Naruto and the girls. After a moment, he nodded and said, I'm sure you know all about Minato-kun's abilities and what kind of person he was like. He was a good lad. The happiest we ever saw him was when he told us Kushina-chan was pregnant with you. They decided to name you after the main character in Jiraiya's first book. Unfortunately, that book didn't sell that well, namely because it was written in wartime. So he turned to writing smut instead, knowing that would really make him the big bucks, so to speak. And, as you know, he is a super pervert, so his inspiration had to come from somewhere. Naruto grumbled irritably and said, yeah. And when I think I finally get away from the perverts, I meet this world's version of Jiraiya, Zack. Oh well, I'll just have to deal with it. I guess I can stay away from Toki-chan's place if Zack's going to be there. I don't want to cause any unnecessary tension between anyone. Weedy smiled at him and said, you're more than welcome to come visit any of us, even Toki-chan. If Zack can't handle you being around, then that's on him. You shouldn't be afraid to be Toki-chan's friend, just because Zack is a pain in the butt. But, if you can't do it, I understand. I just think you could use all the friends you could get, and Toki-chan would be a good one to have. Thanks Weedy-chan. I'll think about it, okay. I doubt Toki-chan would really want me around after saying what I did to her though. Naruto said sadly. Reiho frowned at him and asked, what exactly did you say to her anyways? I simply told her that she wouldn't believe me even if I told her the truth. I told her that Zack gave me the same vibes I got from Jiraiya and I trust my instincts on things like that. I also told her that I didn't want to say too much more, because I didn't want her to hate me for badmouthing her boyfriend. I hate to say this, but Toki seems naive. I don't think she can see the bad things about Zack. Naruto explained. Reiho sighed and said, "You're right. She's blind to the truth about him. But that's no reason to avoid Toki. She'd be happy to be your friend, I'm sure of it." Thanks, Ray-chan. Like I said, I'll think about it. Shima smiled at them before saying, "Well, Pa and I better be heading back now. Remember, when you're ready to begin your training, just summon one of us and we'll take you home to Mount Myoboku. If you need anything else, or simply want to send messages to your friends or anything else, summon Gamakichi. He really misses you." And with that said, the Toad Sages disappeared in twin puffs of smoke. Once they were gone, Naruto smiled at the girls and asked, "Sue, why were you three looking for me? Did you need something in particular?" Enda smirked, deciding to be a bit evil. "Reiho wanted to see you again. She just couldn't stop thinking about you and how handsome you are." Naruto and Reiho both blushed deeply at her words. Enda, "That's not it at all. I mean, sure, he's certainly handsome, but," shaking her head to try and get her thoughts and blush under control, Reiho decided to try and change the subject. I was just worried about you. That's all. I mean, I don't really care, but I wanted to know if you were okay. Besides that, Enda needs to show you to her house." Enda leaned against Naruto and said, "We're gonna be the bestest roommates ever. Ooh, maybe we can cuddle. Cuddling sounds nice. I've never had someone to cuddle with before. I wonder what it's like." The blonde just continued to blush, not quite sure how to react to any of what was going on right now. So he just sat there with the three girls for a while, just basking in the silence for the time being. Unknown to them, they were being watched by a certain redhead who had gone in search of them. Seeing how close they all were brought a small frown to her face. "You all really like him, huh? What makes you trust him and not Zack-kun? I don't understand." Kanahagakure. Tsunade frowned as she looked at the two toads that had appeared in her office. She had listened patiently as they explained everything to her. At the moment, she honestly didn't know what the hell to think. After some time, she let out a heavy sigh and asked, "He's not coming back, is he?" Fukasaku shook his head and said, "No. To be fair, this village and this world were undeserving of him. Naruto boy deserved better than what he was given. He's a good kid with a good head on his shoulders, despite everything he's been through. But, I'm sure Naruto boy can recreate that seal of his if anyone here wants to go to him. A return trip just doesn't seem possible unless he creates a reverse seal to the one he used to leave this world. And I can't see him doing that. So if anyone wants to be with him, it'll be a one-way trip. And you'd better hope that whoever you send is fond of him and won't try to harm him in any way, because we won't stand for it. Nor will his new friends. Those girls seemed rather fond of him already." Tsunade's eyebrow raised in curiosity as she asked, "Girls? He just got there and there's already girls interested in him. Damn, he works fast." Shima and her husband chuckled a bit before she said, "Before you question him, I wouldn't worry, Tsunade-chan. Naruto-kun is nothing like Jiraiya. And, you should know that Naruto-kun has met someone just as bad as Jiraiya in that world. And they are not getting along. I wouldn't be surprised if a conflict arises between the two of them because they can't put their differences aside and try to make things work out between them and this Toki girl they mentioned." Pausing for a moment, Shima's eyes stared hard into Tsunade's and she said, "I think he's already got a bit of a crush on the poor girl. But she doesn't realize that her boyfriend is pretty much that world's version of Jiraiya. From how Naruto-kun was talking, I think he's only going to be hurting himself if he tries to be friends with Toki when Zack is around. Knowing him, he'll try to make sure everyone else is happy without taking the time to think about himself." Tsunade sighed and shook her head. Damn it, Naruto-kun. Fine then. I'll have to think of something to see if I can help him in any way. For now, you said you had a message to deliver to Sakura, right? Seeing them nod, Tsunade snapped her fingers and directed one of her Anbu to go and collect Sakura for her. As they waited, the blonde woman cast a glance at the window and said, Jiraiya, I suggest you leave before I clobber you again. You shouldn't even be out of the hospital yet anyways. Jiraiya entered the office with a scowl on his face. You forget, he was my apprentice. I think I deserve to know where the hell he's gone. Tsunade stood up and took slow steps towards Jiraiya, who started to cower before her gaze. You have no right to call him your apprentice, Jiraiya. You didn't even attempt to teach him, in case you forgot. I won't let you have any chance at reaching him. So you can either get lost or I can destroy you. Which will it be? Jiraiya scowled at her again before he turned and left through the window once again. After a moment, Tsunade walked outside and glared at Kakashi. As for you, I've got a few questions for you. How do you feel about Naruto? Do you blame him for Minato's death as well? Why were you so fixated on the Uchiha to the point you neglected your sensei's only son and your other student? Answer me, Hitaki. Kakashi sighed as he put away his book. Looking into Tsunade's eyes, he said, I honestly don't care one way or another about Naruto Uzumaki. He's a mediocre shinobi with barely any passable qualities. I don't blame him for sensei's death. And as for Sasuke and my neglect of my other students, I felt I owed it to Obito to take care of Sasuke. Besides that, Sakura had no drive to learn and Naruto just didn't have the same level of talent Sasuke did. It doesn't matter that he was sensei's son, he just didn't have the same kind of talent his parents had. So I focused on the one that did. Tsunade scowled down at him and commanded in a cold voice, leave Hitaki. You're lucky I don't take your damn headband and dishonorably discharge you for your behavior. No, I've got a different punishment in mind for you. For your neglect, your blatant favoritism, and just generally being an asshole, all of your Ika books are to be collected and burned to cinders. And from now on, you aren't allowed to buy any Ika books, you aren't allowed to borrow any, and you cannot read any in front of people or in the privacy of your own home. If you fail to adhere to these new rules I'm imposing upon you, you will be demoted down to the rank of genin and you'll be tasked with doing nothing but D-rank missions by yourself for the next 3 years. I don't give a damn how skilled a shinobi you are, Hitaki. Not even you are exempt from punishment. Now, I suggest you start collecting all your books and have them ready to burn in 15 minutes. Not a second later. Do you understand me? Kakashi's eye widened in horror and he asked, why you can't be serious? You're bluffing, right? Tick, tock, tick, tock. The clock is counting, Hitaki. If I were you, I'd get moving. Chop chop, Tsunade said, grinning sadistically down at him. The cycloptic Jonin's eye began to water as he quickly moved towards his apartment. The entire time, he swore he could hear his books crying out to him to save them. He could hear their agonized death cries and it was tormenting him. Once back inside her office, Tsunade took a seat at her desk and smiled pleasantly at Sakura, who was looking at her and the toads hopefully. Sakura-chan, have a seat. These two are the sages of Mount Myoboku, Fukasaku-sama and Shima-sama. They have a message for you from Naruto-kun. Shima stared at the pink-haired girl and said, I'm sorry, but Naruto-kun will not be able to keep his promise to you. He wanted us to apologize to you on his behalf. We know how much Sasuke means to you, but... Sakura shook her head and exclaimed, I don't care about that. Sasuke can burn in hell for all I care. I was ready to be Naruto-kun's girlfriend. I wanted to see him again. I wanted to tell Naruto-kun how I feel about him. All this time, I've been striving to get stronger just so I could stand beside him and to really make him notice me. I was getting stronger for him this entire time. I really don't want to lose him. Please, if he can't come here, can you take me to him? I don't want to be away from him forever. Just the idea of never seeing him again hurts. It hurts so bad. As Sakura clutched at her chest and started to cry, Shima hopped up onto her shoulder and gently patted her cheek. Hush now, little one. We'll tell Naruto-kun what you just said. We're positive he can recreate the seal. When he does, we'll deliver it to you and Tsunade-chan. But you have to know, it'll be a one-way trip. You'll never get to come back here. So if you choose to be with him, you should say goodbye to everyone you know and love first. The Pinkett shook her head and said, I don't even need to think on it. I love him. I love him so much that being without him for as long as I have been has been killing me. I was looking forward to seeing him again. Slowly counting the days until he'd return. I need to be with Naruto-kun. I don't even care if I'm stuck having to share him with someone else. Fukasaku smiled at the girl and said, well said girlie. We'll be sure to tell Naruto that. I'm sure he'll be happy to hear it. Sakura smiled at them in thanks. Thank you. That means a lot to me. Is that all he had to say? How is he doing? Did he look well? Has he made any friends? Shima giggled and said, he's made some new friends, yes. One of them is this cute little dragon. The others are all girls that seem to have taken a liking to him. I think 2 of them have crushes on Naruto-kun. Though, he has met someone that's just like Jiraiya in that world. I wouldn't be surprised if they start fighting with one another someday. Sakura frowned and said, can't escape perverts anywhere, I swear. Just so long as they don't end up killing each other, I'm sure everything will be fine. Just, please let him know I'm thinking about him and I want to see him as soon as possible. I can't wait to see that seal. Tsunade chuckled softly and smiled at her apprentice. I'll miss you, Sakura. But you should definitely follow your heart on this one. I'm sure he'll be happy to see you again. I certainly hope so, Tsunade-sama. Sakura said with a tiny smile before watching as the elder toads left. Naruto. Naruto whistled in appreciation as he looked around the interior of the house he'd be sharing with Enda. This is amazing. I didn't think you'd live in such a huge house. Do you live with your parents or by yourself, Enda-chan? Enda hopped in front of Naruto before poking him on the nose. Boop. Throwing her arms up in the air, she spun around and giggled. Nope. I live here all on my lonesome. I still wanna cuddle. I bet it'll be warm, cuddling with you. Call it a gut feeling. You sure that isn't moving just a little fast? Naruto asked with a drop of sweat trickling down the back of his neck. Nope. It's just cuddling silly. Nothing dirty. Besides, we'd both be wearing pajamas, right? So no worries. Enda explained while nodding sagely. Naruto chuckled and wrapped Enda in a hug. Thank you Enda-chan. This really means a lot to me. The blue-haired girl blushed prettily at that, but nodded and said, of course Naruto-kun. I'll do anything and everything to make sure you have a happy life here. Thank you. Right now though, I think I'm in need of a shower. Unfortunately, I kinda need some new clothes. Ones that won't make me stand out too much in the crowd, you know. Any idea where I can get such clothes? Naruto questioned. Well, Weedy makes a lot of really good clothes for both men and women. She sells them in a shop she owns. I think that's probably the best place to get you some new outfits. And if you wanted, you could become a knight at the castle, but something tells me that's just not the job for you, right? Seeing him nod, Enda tapped a finger against her chin in thought. I suppose we could ask Weedy if she'll make some new clothes for you from scratch, but she'd need your measurements. Plus, it would take a while. So right now, the best thing to do would be to go to Weedy's shop and see what we can find in your size. Alright. Thanks again Enda-chan, Naruto said. Anytime, Enda said with a bright smile on her face. It was at this point that 2 puffs of smoke appeared in the room, catching them off guard. When the smoke cleared, they saw the same 2 toads from earlier standing before them. Sorry for just popping in unannounced like this, Naruto boy, Enda-chan. Fukasaku said. Sakura-chan wanted us to pass on a message to Ya. She says she doesn't care about Sasuke. All she wants is to see you again, Naruto boy. Naruto blinked in confusion and asked, wait, why me? Isn't she in love with Sasuke? Shima sighed and shook her head. You can be so dense sometimes, Naruto-kun. Sakura admitted it herself that she's in love with you. She wants to come here and be with you. To start a family with you. All she needs is you to recreate that seal you used to come here. And if I were you, I wouldn't keep her waiting too much longer. She misses you dearly. The blonde frowned in confusion for a time before he sighed and said, you're absolutely sure about this, right? Seeing them both nod, he shrugged and said, all right. Give me a few days and I should have the seal ready by then. 3 days at the latest. I just hope there's no real time differential between the two worlds, or who knows what could happen. So I'll try to have it ready as soon as possible. The two toads nodded before they waved goodbye and disappeared in twin puffs of smoke once again. Once they were gone, Enda simply looked sadly at Naruto and thought, this Sakura girl, just what is she to you, Naruto-kun? I don't want some girl coming here and stealing away such a nice guy. Phooey. Seeing the state Enda was in, Naruto became worried for her and hurried over to her side. Enda-chan, what's wrong? Are you feeling ill? Did something happen? Enda looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Clinging to him, she said, I don't want some girl coming here and stealing you away from me. You're the nicest guy I've ever met and you don't treat me like I'm some weird, crazy girl. You actually like me for who I really am. So, looking him in the eyes, Enda contemplated it for a moment before smashing her lips against his, kissing him deeply for a time. When they separated, she said, there. Now you're mine forever. You can't leave me now, okay Naruto-kun. Naruto blushed deeply and just stared at Enda in a daze. Slowly nodding his head, he soon gained a goofy grin before he fainted, falling backwards with a thud as he hit the ground. Seeing this, Enda bopped herself on the head and stuck her tongue out cutely. Oopsie daisy. Maybe I shoulda thought that one through some more first. Oh well. Sitting down beside him, she laid his head in her lap and began to gently comb her fingers through his hair. Now and forever, Naruto-kun, she whispered with a serene smile on her face. Nobody could take him from her, especially not without a hell of a fight. It took a few hours before Naruto finally regained consciousness. When he did and what Enda had done earlier registered, he turned a deep red. It didn't help that his head was resting on Enda's lap. Why you kissed me? Giggling to herself, Enda said, yep. My first kiss ever and I gave it to you. Isn't that neato? That was my first kiss too. Well, the first one that actually counts. He said, remembering the horrible experience that occurred with Sasuke years ago. I'd rather not remember the first one. I say it doesn't count, because, yuck. Enda blinked before looking into his eyes curiously. What was your first kiss like? I was pissed at Sasuke at the time and was glaring at him. Some asshole decided to lean his chair back for the fun of it and knocked me into Sasuke. Our lips collided and thus, my first kiss was stolen courtesy of a couple of assholes. Naruto explained. Like I said, it doesn't count. Gross. I don't mind boy love, but this Sasuke guy bugs me, based on what you've told us before. Sorry you had to experience that, Naruto-kun. Enda said as she gently ran her fingers through his hair. But at least I got your first real kiss. Yay. Chuckling, Naruto nodded and said, you're sweet, Enda-chan. But, I feel that it's a little soon to rush into any kind of relationship or anything. I want to spend time getting to know you and the others first before we even think about a possible relationship. And, frowning slightly at this point, Naruto averted his gaze and said, chances are, you might have to share me with someone else. I'd rather have a polyamorous relationship than hurt anyone. Besides that, I've always dreamed of having a big family someday with someone I love, or multiple someones, as it were. It's not ideal, but. Enda frowned at him for a time before releasing a heavy sigh. I don't want to have to share you if we end up together, Naruto-kun. But, if Sakura is coming here to be with you, she'd better be open to sharing. Because I like you. You're a good person and you've been good to me so far. I want to see if there can be something between us. So I won't just back down and let someone else have you. Understand, Buster? Naruto chuckled softly and said, yeah, I understand, Enda-chan. Still, I'm sorry. Anyways, I'm feeling pretty bushed. Mind showing me to a room so I can hopefully get a little sleep? Enda grinned and said, we'll share a bed. I did say it was cuddle time, didn't I? Just let me change into my pajamas and then we can cuddle whaddly dee. The blonde blinked a couple of times before asking, are you hyper? The blue-haired girl giggled and said, maybe a little. Point stands though. We're going to cuddle and you're going to enjoy it. Chuckling, Naruto slowly stood up and offered her a hand to help her up as well. Sure thing, Enda-chan. Cuddling sounds nice. I've never had anyone to cuddle with before. Me neither. It's gonna be so much fun. Oh, but, do you have any pajamas or any kind of nightclothes to wear? Enda questioned. Naruto smiled at her and withdrew a sealing scroll from within his pockets. Holding up a finger to shush her when she opened her mouth to speak, he unrolled it and poured a bit of chakra into one of the seals on said scroll. When a small bag popped out a moment later, he smirked at her and said, I have some of my clothes packed in this. Pajamas included, of course. Ooh, that was neato. What kind of trick was that? Enda asked as she looked at the scroll in amazement. That, my dear Enda-chan, is a shinobi technique known as fuinjutsu. This particular kind allows me to store items of virtually any kind within the seal and then withdraw them later when I need them. Plus, it makes it easier to carry things rather than being constantly weighed down by a backpack or something. Naruto explained with a grin on his face. Ooh, what else can these seal thingies do? Enda questioned, sounding quite eager to learn what else fuinjutsu could do. Well, seals can be used to do any number of things. You can store fire and unseal it later, turning it into a fireball of sorts. You can do the same with pretty much any element in that way. I was working on a seal that would reduce someone's age, but I scrapped that project pretty much the moment I decided to leave my world. I suppose I can finish it and send the final product to Tsunade via the Toad summons. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto scratched his cheek and continued. You can use seals to create powerful barriers to either protect yourself or seal someone within. As for my greatest seal, that's the one that I used to leave the elemental nations and come here. So really, seals can do almost anything, so long as you have an imagination. Ooh, I wish I could use some of those nifty seal thingies. I could use them for so many things. Like maybe storing water that I could use to clean my hair if I go traveling. Or maybe storing away snacks for eating later on the road or something. Or, Enda started rambling on, causing Naruto to poke her in the forehead lightly. Huh, what was that for Naruto-kun? The blonde chuckled a bit before saying, you were starting to ramble. If you and your friends all have access to magic, then maybe we can find a way for you all to learn fuinjutsu. But for now, I'd like to take a shower and then get some sleep. I'm bushed. Oh, sorry Naruto-kun. I tend to do that sometimes. And that sounds awesome. I've never really used magic before, but technically we could all learn how to use it if we put our minds to it. If it means I can learn to use that nifty fuinjutsu thingy, then I'm all for it. Enda exclaimed. Then what he said registered and she said, ooh. Follow me, I'll show you right where the shower is. Remember though, when you're done, it's absolute cuddle time. Cuddly cuddle. Naruto chuckled as he followed Enda to a bathroom. Thanking her, he made sure to bring his travel bag into the bathroom with him before he shut and locked the door. I trust her, but at the same time, she's rather impulsive. No telling what she might do if I didn't lock the door. He thought to himself in amusement. Kanahagakure. Tsunade sighed as she watched Sakura pacing around in her office. It had been 1 week exactly since Naruto's disappearance. While the fifth Hokage knew the toads had likely delivered the message to Naruto by now, she also knew that there was a strong likelihood that things worked differently in that world, potentially even dimension, so she knew that they would need to just be patient with him. Sakura, on the other hand. Why hasn't he sent it yet? It's been 3 days. I'm so worried about that numbskull. Kami, I miss him so much. Why won't he hurry it up already? Damn it. Sakura ranted on, unable to contain herself. The blonde Hokage wanted to bash her head into her desk a few times, but refrained from doing so. Instead, she said, Sakura-chan, listen to me. Once her apprentice stopped pacing and turned to her, Tsunade decided to explain her theory. You have to understand something here, Sakura-chan. Naruto has literally left our world, and potentially even our dimension. The laws of time and causality very likely differ between our locations. So while a full week has passed here, it's possible that it's only been a few days there. There's no way for us to know for sure. All we can do right now is be patient and wait for Naruto-kun to send us the seal. It's very likely that it could take weeks there to finish the seal. Fuinjutsu is a very complicated shinobi art and, if even one brush stroke is off, seals can have devastating consequences. The seal Naruto-kun used is unlike anything seen before. So you may have to wait months here before he's finally finished. I know you don't want to hear that, but the best thing we can do is be patient. Understand? Sakura looked as if she was on the brink of tears. Collapsing to her knees, she said quietly, but, I hate having to wait like this. I've waited 2 whole years to see him again. And then this happened. All because that stupid asshole Jiraiya wouldn't take his training seriously. Naruto-kun, Naru, hiccuping at this point, she let the tears fall. He deserved so much better than he got here. I was so cruel to him. I should never had made him make that stupid promise. I should have realized how I felt from the beginning. If he knew that I was here waiting for him, do you think he would have stayed? When her student looked her way, Tsunade shook her head sadly. I'm afraid that's not a question I can answer, Sakura-chan. If you want to know the truth, it's best to get it straight from Naruto-kun's mouth. After all, he's the only one that could answer that question. For now, why don't you sit somewhere and tell me when and how you realized your feelings for Naruto-kun, Sakura giggled sadly, but nodded her head and sat down in a chair across from her mentor. Wiping away her tears, she smiled and began her explanation. With Sasuke gone, it gave me a lot of time to think on things. It doesn't help that when I saw Naruto-kun in the hospital like that, it hurt. A lot. Naruto, no matter how I treated him, he was always kind to me. He always did things to show he cared. I didn't notice though, because I was so focused on Sasuke. Kakashi never bothered to try and correct our behavior either. He focused solely on Sasuke and wrote Naruto-kun and me off as if we didn't matter. If he truly cared about anyone but himself and Sasuke, he'd have worked to fix our character flaws and generally make us a kick-ass team. Sighing sadly, she looked solemnly into her sensei's eyes. Whether anyone knew it or not, Naruto-kun would always take time to help me train. And I'd spend time trying to teach him things he didn't know or didn't understand all that well. He's a lot smarter than he let on, and I can understand why he'd hide it after learning about his secret. Tsunade nodded in understanding and motioned for Sakura to continue. Seeing the go-ahead, Sakura frowned and said, in front of other people, I'd keep up the act that I hated him and wanted nothing to do with him. When we were alone though, I actually enjoyed his company. But, I was afraid to show him that I cared about him. Then Sasuke betrayed the village and I made Naruto make that stupid promise to me when I knew deep down that I shouldn't do such a terrible thing. That idiot held back because of that promise. He nearly died. And it was all my fault. Tears trickling down her cheeks again, Sakura looked pleadingly into her mentor's eyes. Tsunade Shisho, I made such a terrible mistake. Naruto-kun did everything for me. All because he loves me. And I was too afraid of what others might think that I didn't let him know that I liked him too. The more time we spent together, the more I realized I was falling for him. I bet he thinks I hate him or something. Tsunade frowned at this before she walked around to Sakura's side of the desk and hugged her close, letting the pinket's head rest against her bosom. The blonde listened silently as her apprentice sobbed. After some time, she finally spoke up. I'm afraid I don't know what to tell you, Sakura-chan. I doubt there are any words I could formulate that would help you right now. Just be patient and, when you get to see him again, tell him everything. Be completely honest with not just yourself, but him as well. Before you leave though, I must ask, can you think of anyone else that might wish to go with you to be with him for any reason? The pink-haired girl sighed and nodded her head. Yes. She hates me though for what I've put Naruto-kun through. But she's in love with him too. I don't want to share him with her though. The fifth chuckled softly as she began to stroke Sakura's hair. Sweetheart, whether you like it or not, you're going to end up having to share him. Naruto's heart is too big to hurt anyone. From what the toads told us, chances are very high that you'll end up in a polyamorous relationship with him and several other girls. What does it matter if there's one more besides you that wants to go be with him? Sakura scowled, but said nothing. After some time had passed in silence, she said, I understand what you're saying, Tsunade Shisho. But, we just don't get along. Besides that, she was never there for him like I was. Or, tried to be, anyways. Yes, Hinata loves him too, but she never showed him how she felt. She couldn't even talk to him without stuttering and fainting and, If she cared so much about him, she should have built up the confidence to tell him so and ask him out on a date or something. But, she watched in silence as he suffered all kinds of abuse. We can't stand each other. Will I really have to share him with her? Tsunade simply giggled for a time before Sakura whacked her on the chest. It's not funny, she said with a pout aimed in Tsunade's direction. Tsunade smirked at her and said, it kind of is from an outside perspective. If you two truly love Naruto, then why not work together towards achieving your goals instead of fighting with one another over your differences? Then again, you don't have to share him with any girls from this world. But if you go to him, chances are he'll have a few girls interested in him already. Who knows? Someone might have even stolen his first kiss. Sakura scowled for a time before a thought struck her. Giggling for a while, she soon explained what was so funny to her sensei. Actually, as much as he may hate it, Naruto-kun's first kiss was stolen in a really bad way. On the day of team placements, Naruto-kun got up in Sasuke's face and was yelling at him. This jerk decided he'd try and be funny, so he leaned his chair back and bumped into Naruto-kun. Naruto-kun fell forward and locked lips with Sasuke. I know it doesn't count, but still, that was an interesting experience, I'm sure. It's also something he'd love to forget. Tsunade simply giggled along with her student for a time. Together, they discussed a great many things, including different subjects revolving around Naruto. They would end up chatting together throughout the day and well into the night, simply enjoying one another's company. Kamsa. It was the day after he had first arrived in Kamsa, and already he was starting to hate life here. Sure, things were wonderful for the most part, but then you throw in Zack the Terrible, Naruto's current nickname for him, and that kind of sours the mood. What led up to this, you might ask? Well, Enda had insisted that Naruto come with her to see Toki. The blue-haired girl wanted to see if Toki could teach her how to use magic, and she insisted that Naruto come along to show Toki some of the cool things he could do. Unfortunately, Zack was the one who answered the door, and the scowl he was giving Naruto was enough to chase away cute little animals, it was so fierce. What are you doing here? Pinching the bridge of his nose, Naruto shook his head and grumbled out, I came with Enda-chan to see Toki-chan. And just so you know, you egotistical, perverted prick, I'm not aiming to steal Toki-chan from you. She's your girlfriend and she loves you very much. That much is easy enough to see. No, I simply want to be friends with everyone and try to make a new life here away from the hell I came from. Zack looked about ready to say something else, but Naruto glared hatefully into his eyes and said, "Before you say anything, let me just ask you this. Are you upset by the fact another guy is trying to befriend Toki-chan? Or are you upset that a new guy has come and seems to have won the attention of Toki-chan's friends? I already know the answer either way. Now are you going to move so we can come in, or should I just come back later when you're not around?" Zack scowled at Naruto and said, "So what if you're right about me? You don't have any right to barge into our lives like this. Where the hell did you even come from anyways? We don't want you here, Naruto." Enda scowled up at him and shouted, "Speak for yourself, jerkface. For your information, the rest of us like Naruto-kun being here. He's really nice and he doesn't perv on us either. Not like you. We can see it plain as day on your face, Zack. You stare at us like meat at the market. Always leering at us. I bet you like to imagine us or something." Zack scoffed and said, "You wish. Fine, come on in. Do what you need to do and then leave. You aren't welcome here, Uzumaki." TCH. Naruto scoffed before brushing by Zack, making extra sure to shove him into the doorframe as he did so. Smirking to himself, he walked over to the table that Toki sat at and smiled at her. "Heya Toki-chan. Sorry about yesterday. Anyways, Enda-chan wanted to talk to you about something. I'm here to show off some magic tricks, as Shikao.